All right, we're back with Lemonade Stand in Japan, joined by Jeffrey Hall, who is a special lecturer in Japanese studies.
Actually, lecturer.
Oh, not special.
That was I got promoted a couple years ago, so I'm a lecturer now.
You get promoted and lose the special?
Special in Japan means you're a temporary employee who will be unless you do your
It's so funny because I read the title and I was like, oh, he's a special lecturer.
So you're normal now.
When you see special in a name in Japan, it usually means that you're not a regular employee yet.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, congratulations on the promotion.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you so much for coming on our show. I mean, this is really, I think, interesting to all of us.
Yeah. I think the big reason we wanted to have you on is I think we talk about Japan a lot on this show. Brandon talks about Japan a lot in his content, but I think Japan's politics or the issues that it's facing and the way that information circulates through Western media is always a little disconnected just because of the language barrier, because things don't get reported in the fashion that it would if it was happening in your own country, right? So people have a very disconnected or distorted view of what problems actually are here. And I figured we'd ask you maybe the obvious question first, which is, we're having you on as kind of our Japan expert. I've seen you on a ton of shows. I've seen you on like Al Jazeera, CNN, BBC. But you're a white guy from the United States. So could you give me a little background on, your pathway to becoming this person that gets interviewed across all of these big news programs and why you're here with us?
Sure, yeah. Well, anyway, thanks for having me on, guys. I started out in America as a weeb who likes anime. So
You're right at all.
I'm actually
the right set
I'm very impressed. That is super cool that I'm here in this studio. But I also had academic interests as well. And I was a history major in college in America. And I decided to study abroad in Japan for 1 year. I studied abroad in Nagoya. I loved it there. I loved living in Japan, the vibe of just being here. I mean, I'm sure you guys love it too, like visiting.
Yeah.
And I was like, I gotta get back. And so I did the easy mode to get back in Japan, which is become an English teacher. And I did that for a couple of years. Then I decided I wanted to go to graduate school and research Japan. So to do that, I needed better Japanese language abilities than I had from studying 4 years in college. So I spent 2 years full-time studying Japanese at a Japanese language school. Then I went to graduate school at Waseda University for a master's and a PhD in international studies. And I researched and wrote about what was emerging at that time, which was right-wing YouTubers. And the kind
in
of
Japan.
Yeah, in Japan.
Okay.
And it's a huge thing now, but back then it was just kind of starting out, and the only kind of politics content that was on Japanese YouTube was basically right-wing stuff. And so,
what year is this?
This is around 2010-ish. They start their online channel in 2005, and eventually these activists moved to YouTube, and they organize offline protests. They crowdfund a fishing boat that they take to the disputed islands, the Senkaku Islands that the Chinese claim and the Japanese control. And so they get to film themselves being basically attacked by Chinese patrol boats and the Japanese patrol boats protecting them. And so they go viral in China for this, cause protests in China. They are involved in all kinds of things related to historical revisionism, and they're the kind of people who today would be very happy that Miss Takaichi is prime minister, because she shares a lot of their views on history and nationalism and that kind of stuff. But by studying that, I wasn't sure I was going to get a job, but it turned out that my professors really liked my dissertation. It became my book eventually, and I was able to be introduced to some part-time gigs, a postdoc, and then eventually now I have a full-time position teaching at Kanda University of International Studies, which is outside Tokyo in Chiba near the Makuhari Messe Convention Center. But it's a very nice campus. We have many students who study abroad there. If any of your students are listening, or any of your listeners are students,
there are students.
Yeah, I think you have a younger audience than I do when I'm on the BBC with the elderly people in hospital waiting rooms. Yeah, if any of you are considering studying in Japan, if you study through IES Abroad, which is a consortium that involves many different universities and you choose Tokyo, I will be one of your teachers at Kondo University of International Studies, teaching, depending on what year it is, politics or popular culture or Japanese society and culture.
I mean, you told us you were considering not coming on our show, and then some of your students said they'd heard of us, and you're like, all right, I'll give it a shot.
I was like, does anybody know what a lemonade stand is? And then during the break time, a student came up to me. He's like, my boyfriend's a huge fan, he also loves Ludwig and I'm like, oh, okay, well, I guess this is pretty big. I mean,
did he mention DougDoug at all? Or
no,
Atrioc?
I don't think they're big readers, so they wouldn't read a published author's book.
That's true. More of a literary space.
Makes sense.
Makes sense. That tracks.
Do you mind if I ask a high level question? So, we cover like the breaking news or whatever in America a lot, whatever it is, Trump, Epstein, whatever the big news of the week is. Can I ask you, like, what is the big stories in Japan right now? What is moving everyone's minds in Japan? What is everyone talking about? What's the gossip?
As part of that, I think something I also hear is that the average person in Japan is not very politically inclined. And maybe that's also part of the answer is that the average person isn't really thinking about it. And I'm curious,
Yes. I think one of you on your last podcast, you mentioned that your haircut person asked you about politics or something. Yeah. So
I asked him and he didn't want to answer.
Yeah. So in Japan, there is a saying. There are three things you should never talk about with people. One is religion, because you could have a different view of, somebody could be going to hell or something like that. You don't want to have that conversation.
Sure.
The second is baseball, because you might have different teams.
Doesn't everyone agree on Ohtani, though?
Well, yeah, everybody in Japan loves Ohtani, but among their local teams.
I see.
And the third is politics.
Yeah.
So people don't talk about politics normally here. Most people don't learn much about politics in school, in high school, in an effort to be very neutral. They basically end up learning very little about the political parties and what they stand for.
Really?
So when I have Japanese students coming into a class that I'm teaching about Japanese politics, I have to start from square one, just basically giving them the political history of their country, because they'll get some in their history class, but they won't know what the parties really stand for right now. And now that we have the first female prime minister, who is very, 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 very conservative, for some reason she has an 80%, 70% approval rating among young people under 30, which is like incredible for a Japanese prime minister.
I saw it was like a record high, right?
Yes. And in general, the population, except for elderly people who make up a big chunk of the population, are overwhelmingly positive about her. And I think a lot of it is just because of the vibes on TV of like, oh, cool, like an outsider, a woman as prime minister. But if you were to ask them about specific policies, they wouldn't really even know that much about what the policies are. And basically, most of the policies she's been following so far are just the same policies as the last prime minister, who was extremely unpopular. Right. But yeah, I mean, one of the big stories here is that she did finally come out and have a policy that is different from her predecessors, and that is saying that Japan's self-defense forces could face a situation where they help Taiwan if Taiwan is blockaded or invaded. And up until now, Japan has kept quiet. Strategic ambiguity, they would call it. Like the big lie that we must all agree to so that there's no World War III is that Taiwan is a part of China. It's not a completely separate country. Don't talk about it like it's a separate country. Don't say you're going to defend it directly. And she broke that taboo by saying, oh, well, it could be a life-threatening situation for Japan, so we would likely, send our self-defense forces. And so now China is very pissed off about this. One of their diplomats tweeted about cutting off her head. He didn't. Japan is a high context language, so he didn't say her name, but he was quote tweeting an article about her saying that about Taiwan, and he said, like, the dirty neck that sticks its its way into somebody else's business will be chopped off. Most people...
He could be referring to anyone. Context is really missing.
I feel like that could be anything.
It could be her.
You can't say anything nowadays. You can't say anything nowadays. You can't even...
Wokes come for the guillotine talk, and I won't stand for it.
Aiden was trying to run into some forbidden area. Maybe he was talking about his neck. Maybe the context is...
Yeah, exactly. So, or the whole neck of the country, even.
This is true. Yeah. That's scary.
Oh, man. Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned this because this is the one, I was doing a little research. That's the article you're seeing. That's, there's like dozens of updates on this. It's like really big. And then I think China's responding now or something, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
In addition, that tweet, the guy did sort of get canceled for it. He had to delete it, but the Chinese government just said, oh, that was just his personal opinion. But China is taking its first steps beyond words now by last night in the middle of the night, the news broke that they were going to tell their citizens, please don't travel to Japan. And you guys have been traveling around Japan. There's tons of Chinese tourists here. They're usually the number one or number two amount of tourists coming into the country. Them and Korea, South Korea, the two countries that Japan often has disputes over history with. And so if the millions of Chinese tourists who are coming to Japan just drop off, that will hurt a lot of tourist companies and restaurants and things like that. But Takaichi supporters online, they don't want Chinese tourists in Japan. They despise the Chinese and their government, and they think the tourists are rude. They think the tourists are kicking deer. They are happy. Like the reactions online are like, hell yeah, she's done it.
Right,
like no more Chinese are coming. They're not thinking about the hotels and the restaurants and the other businesses that are like selling stuff to Chinese. They're like, I don't have to see as many Chinese people anymore. Like, this makes me happy. And so that could be good for her supporters, but it will have an economic impact on the country.
Right.
I did want to ask, because you're stressing that Takaichi is so conservative, but she's a part of this party, the LDP, that has been in power for a very long time, basically since the 50s with some very small gaps. And I wanted to get a feel for how that intersects with other things I've read about. In the recent election, there was a growth in other parties that are maybe further to the right or just right-wing in general, like the Sanseito party.
Yes.
And how is she like more centrist than these other parties that have also experienced growth? What is her like political position within Japan? Where do these other parties fall? What is the political spectrum? How has the political spectrum changed as of the recent election, and where does she stand among that?
Well, it's a difficult question to answer because in Japan, being conservative or liberal or left-wing or right-wing, there's totally different issues than Canada or America. For example, the LDP, it's called the Liberal Democratic Party, but it is a conservative party. It's a big tent conservative party. Today, as we're recording this, it's the 70th anniversary of the party's founding, and that was in 1955, and they called it the 1955 system because they had this system where they won almost every election and easily, and had a majority until the 2000s or until 1990. But still, they have been in power almost all the years since 1955. And they're conservative, but within this conservative party, you have people who are like center-right people who might fit within the U.S. Democratic Party. I would not call the U.S. Democratic Party totally left-wing from my perspective internationally. Of course, there are Bernie Sanders-like people in Japan, but most Democrats, mainstream Democrats in the United States, would be considered sort of center-rightish in Japan. And the LDP has delivered basically a socialist healthcare policy for the country. It's not single payer, but it's somewhere in between the hell of United States healthcare and Canada's free healthcare. So the taxes pay for the healthcare. And if
is this recent or is this a long?
During the post-war years, one of the things the LDP did to stay in power was basically lift ideas from the Socialist Party so that the Socialist Party would be weakened as a political force, and the LDP could continue having a pro-business conservative stance, but while also providing a social safety net to people. And so the socialists didn't really have much to argue about because, people were already living comfortable lives. There wasn't extreme wealth inequality or anything like that. And there was generally just a big middle class in Japan, and there weren't huge billionaires and stuff like that. So until the 1990s, if you were Japanese, why would you want to change horses when you're already winning, right? So the LDP easily won. And then since then, the LDP has sort of had various problems where it's had parties split off from it and people leave. But generally, they've remained a big tent conservative party with also some very right-wing people in it. And some of these right-wing people have, views about World War II that most of your listeners would consider very extreme. Like, Japan was not at fault. Japan didn't commit this atrocity or that atrocity. The comfort women are lying. They were just prostitutes. This kind of ideology, many members of the LDP hold it. Many of them don't. But the party keeps them within. And also another thing that has become one of their policies that you wouldn't really expect from a conservative party is that since Prime Minister Abe became prime minister in around 2012, he opened up immigration to Japan. And so immigrants have been increasing. He also wanted Japan to have millions of more tourists. And this was continued on by successive administrations to the point where there are now too many tourists in the minds of many people, over tourism, and too many immigrants in the minds of many people. If they go on the internet, they'll read all about how bad tourists and immigrants are. And so
is this the right-wing YouTubers? Are they feeding into this?
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's their bread and butter now. So they didn't really talk about immigration back when I was writing my book. Only a little bit about like Chinese people being potential spies and things like that. But now immigration is a huge issue, and the globalists bringing in immigrants, importing immigrants is one of these main things that caused the rise of an alternative far-right party called Sansei-to, which is a YouTuber party founded by a YouTuber.
How about that?
So
Don't look
on the way up.
Don't look at me like that.
That could be us. That could be us.
YouTuber party.
Yeah, just
There's a good thing in that.
In 10 or 15 years, you guys can make a far right party and cash in.
This is
give us the playbook.
It's time. Well, this is a really interesting thing to dig in on because I just watched a video that Dogan put out, and he was explaining that there's this growth behind the Sansei-to party or this anti-immigrant sentiment in general that doesn't just come from this fatigue of the LDP or the existing power. I think there's a common story that we've heard across a bunch of different countries right now is that they're swinging to more right extremes in a reaction to immigration or other factors in their country and with some underlying economic issues that are making people upset, and then they get pushed in some extreme direction, right? He was going on this kind of newer tangent that I think I hadn't seen before, which is that the assassination of Shinzo Abe and his connection to the Unification Church, the Unification Church, and the amount of LDP people that were connected to the Unification Church in that scandal was like this huge fracturing of political trust in the country, and that's a huge reason why people are leaning in this direction or why they're fading away from these institutions. I wonder if you can give some more context to that, like what credence that has or
Sure,
not.
yeah, I think he's completely wrong. But I mean, my political scientist friends and I in our Discord were like reacting to his video, like, "What is this? No." But like, yes, and a little bit. I mean, he was partly right, but I mean, I think he he tries very hard to downplay the rise of Sanseitou and make it seem like it's not a big deal, or that racism isn't as big a deal as people think it is, or something like that. But I think anti-foreigner sentiment in Japan is very much a real thing, and it's getting worse. And Prime Minister Takaichi, in her campaign speech running to be leader of her party, she started out by talking about rude foreign tourists kicking deer.
I saw that.
So I mean, she has, this kind of language against foreigners is now part of the mainstream conversation, made more acceptable, if you will, because Sanseitou is now a major party that has seats. Yeah.
Is that her attempt to like pull some voters back from Sanseitou?
Yes.
She's like leaning, like she probably doesn't believe it herself, but is that what you think? Or
absolutely.
Okay.
There is this feeling within the LDP that they lost voters to Sanseitou because Ishiba was seen as a left-wing prime minister, but he was conservative. He just wasn't the kind of, conservative who believes things about World War II that, Takaichi does.
Sure. Yeah, right.
So he wasn't right-wing enough for them. He wasn't nationalistic enough for them. So they were turned off by him. The right-wing media, the conservative media, was running constant attack pieces against Prime Minister Ishiba. Takaichi adjacent people were criticizing him from within the party. So she undermined his premiership and then took over. And I think the party hopes that the people who went to the right and voted for Sanseitou will come back. But the problem is they're not changing the immigration policy. It doesn't look like they are, at least. They're going to maybe crack down on people who don't pay their taxes, and you can't renew your visa or something if you haven't paid your healthcare premiums. But that's nothing. She still wants to increase foreign labor in this country, but they don't call it immigration. They've never used the I word.
What do they call it?
They call it talent. They call it skilled workers. They have a variety of different
like euphemisms for
They absolutely, once again, when she became prime minister, her administration said, "We do not have an immigration policy. Imin seisaku. We don't have this policy." But they're accepting more workers for industries that need workers. And the labor shortage is huge in Japan.
Yeah. Don't they almost have to, right? Based on the declining age of the Japanese populace and the no births, don't they have to have, like, or does people not agree?
You're sounding like a globalist. The thing is, Japanese people don't want more immigrants, really.
Right.
They don't want their country to change in general, I don't think. Of course, the easy solution to the economy is, rapidly increase the number of foreigners by millions to fill the labor shortage. But the LDP has been doing it more gradually. It's still, though, at a level that it's caused online a whole bunch of influencers and social media people to get rich, just constantly spreading anger and panic about immigrants. There's a town in Saitama called Kawaguchi where there's several hundred Kurdish people who live there. And the right-wing media and right-wing influencers have wildly inflated the threat of these Kurdish migrants. Some of them are applying for asylum. I think they might be eventually rejected and sent back to Turkey. But the Turkish government, of course, is happy to say, yes, people who are applying for asylum in Japan are the bad kind of Turkish people who are against our government. And so the Japanese right-wing people cite Turkey saying, yeah, they think they're like terrorists.
Eating the
almost.
cats.
Dude, everything I hear about the Kurds, man, they just have it so rough. They have it, every bit of news about the Kurds is just them getting treated like shit.
Yeah, and they do a lot of jobs that Japanese don't want to do, like taking down houses. I think in one of your older episodes, you talked about how, in Japan, a house is built for one generation and then it's torn down and rebuilt. Well, who tears down these houses? Japanese people don't want to do that job. It's rough. It doesn't pay very well. A lot of these immigrants have founded companies where they do that. They bring in trucks and they take away the bits of houses and stuff. So in the construction industry, you have immigrants, and that's one place they're visible. But there are also some cases of very sketchy ways that they put like construction materials on the back of a truck that get filmed and go on TikTok and go viral. And they're like, look at these. This is definitely a Kurdish person driving this. I can tell by the way it looks.
By the way they're driving.
Jesus.
But I saw a Japanese guy driving a pretty sketchy van yesterday too, with lots of stuff piled up on the.
No, you're wrong. That was
I didn't see it or know about this problem until right now, but I'm pretty sure that was a Kurd.
I'm pretty sure that's
or a secret Korean, as they say.
Is it maybe half and half actually?
Yeah. In Japan, if somebody gets arrested for a heinous crime and they're on the news, people online will inevitably say, are you sure that's really a Japanese person? Maybe they're a Korean who's taken a Japanese name. They're secretly Korean.
Right.
And within the Yakuza, this is actually a truth that a lot of members of the Yakuza were of Korean background because they were kind of excluded from everyday society. And that's one of the areas pachinko parlors and Yakuza. But I mean, in general, most people who commit crime in Japan are Japanese.
Just by odds alone.
But they don't want to believe that some criminals are Japanese.
I want to just kind of reiterate something you said or re-ask it, because what you're describing sounds exactly like what is going on in America and all over the world, which is that there's, everybody generally feels upset, and then countries are pointing to immigration and saying, this is the problem, right? And then in America, as we've talked about a lot this year, that has resulted in not only the election of Trump, but then the actual action of, much more activity at the border, these, ICE going around doing crazy deportations all over the place. And that's been a huge source of strife, internal discussion, conflict, all that. And then that sounds different from what you're describing, which is the same kind of rhetoric led to Takaichi being elected, but that it's not resulted, they're not going in unmarked vans with masks and pulling Kurdish people off the street. It doesn't sound like. So I'm curious, why do you think that is divergent of the same type of dialogue, but maybe the government isn't actually changing the policy around it?
Well, I think that the real globalism that's happening here is the globalization of anti-immigrant theories and ideas, right? So a lot of what you hear from Sansei To or far-right people in Japan is just imported from America or the UK or Europe, what they say about immigrants over there. They'll often even use videos from America and Europe and say, this could be the future of Japan. Look at this. So most immigrants in Japan are not visibly that different from Japanese people because they're Korean or Chinese. And so that also creates the secret Korean theories and stuff. But you don't have a huge immigration issue yet here, but they have created it in the minds of people to feel like this country's been invaded by immigrants. And partly it's also because there's just so many tourists out there that's what they see. Tourists who don't know the rules, can't speak Japanese, carrying around big suitcases. That guy
trying to jog down the road that he's not supposed to jog down.
Pools.
Wrong lane in the pool.
I mean, you're the reason why I'm going to be put in a camp. No, but
we think it's the same guy.
Aiden, have you seen this man poster? But they're hunting down white guys.
But yeah, I mean, it's Japan doesn't really have that much of an illegal immigration problem. The number, if you look at the stats, actually, the number of illegally residing foreigners in Japan, which they know exactly the number because they don't have a border that's porous.
Right.
It's people who overstay their visas or disappear from their job areas. And it's about 70,000, and it's actually going down because the yen is weaker. So
it's not beneficial to
so yeah
be
so
here.
like a lot of these people, they're from Southeast Asia, like Vietnamese who were working on a farm and then they decide to run off and work somewhere else for slightly more money. But the number of them is very small, and they're not in places where the immigration authorities would know to get them easily. It's not like America where you just roll up at a Home Depot and then just or any restaurant and just try to raid their kitchen. So there isn't the level of undocumented people in Japan, but in Takaichi's campaign, the LDP's campaign, they've talked about the need for zero illegal foreigners, this big slogan. But I mean, the number of foreigners that are illegal in Japan is pretty much zero, statistically speaking.
Minuscule.
Yeah.
Is there any? Because my reaction to this as an outsider is this is insane. Like to give any credence to blaming problems on a portion of the population that is so remarkably small is so obviously wrong. Is there any reaction in the other direction in discussion or the political realm of this mentality is ridiculous and we need to change? Or is it just passiveness and people falling further to the right?
I think that the Japanese left, they do talk about it. They care about the rights of immigrants, but they're just politically weak. And the voters don't really pay much attention to the left-wing parties. Like the Communist Party is a thing here. You can search on YouTube. I took Hassan Piker to the Communist Party headquarters here in Tokyo for a tour. And the communists are all about like, we got to stop these racist lies. Racism is bad. And when you see like anti-racism protesters show up at far-right speeches and stuff, those are usually like the small percentage of Japanese who either vote for the Socialist or the Communist Party. And the Communist Party in Japan is not really that communist. I mean, yes, they love Marx and stuff, but they just don't have any political power. And actually, the Communist committee member who gave us a tour, who could speak English, he told us that young people in Japan, some of them think that the Communist Party is conservative because it's just a name that's so old to them. It's like mentioning like some old YouTuber that like kids these days have never heard of.
PewDiePie.
Yeah, it's like sea nanners. I've never heard about that guy.
It just sounds
Marx
old and crusty.
COD reacts, right? Wait, there was a phrase you said like 10 minutes ago that stuck with me and I wanted to ask you about. You talked about, because I've heard this from other people, talked about Japan generally, or in the minds of people, not changing. Like it's very static in a lot of ways. But from what you're describing, it sounds like at least in recent years or post-COVID, has that been changing? Is this like an actual period where you feel like the decades of similarness is changing, or is this part of the same? Is this more of the, like, is there, in your opinion?
I guess my assumption would be in the wake of COVID, your currency's declining. Like I have a feeling that pressures on people economically would push people to become more politically active or involved or ask for change in a way they haven't before.
I think that it has made people unhappy, just in general unhappy with the government. They don't know what is the problem, but if you're a young person, if you're my age or your age or the age of your viewers in Japan, you look ahead to the future of Japan and you see a dark abyss, which is the country will be overwhelmingly elderly, and you will be one of the few taxpayers who has to pay for this healthcare system that is very generous to everybody in the country. And you don't want to pay taxes. You don't want to, and you see the defense budget's going to go up. You know that somebody's going to have to pay for that too. You see your currency getting weaker. The prices are going up. Your salary is not going up. A lot of people in Japan, I've been here 20 years. For 20 years, people were okay with just having the same salary every year for 20 years because prices never changed.
Right.
And now they are all changing, and it sucks. And people want the government to do something about it. So I think the reason why the LDP has been losing in recent elections is just because people are fed up and they just want to vote for something that's not the LDP. And the LDP has had scandals. Yes, the Abe assassination and Unification Church scandal was a big one, but maybe bigger than that was a slush fund scandal where they were where members of the party would have fundraising parties and they wouldn't fully report the income from them, and then they would use the money that from that unreported funds for God knows what. Those who got caught doing it, they just blamed their low-level staff, and the staff went to prison. That's
beast.
This is how almost all political scandals end in Japan, is with like some low-level person taking the fall, and
or their translator. So their translator was doing it.
They wrote the laws about political funding in a way so that you have to prove that the person was directly knowledgeable of that what they were doing was illegal. So they could just say, I didn't know it was illegal. Like my staff guy said it was okay, and so I did it. And so seeing this kind of money being used is something that makes voters also unhappy. Like, look at these politicians; they're paid so much, and they're still not even reporting things. If I didn't pay my taxes, the government would come after me. If I stole money from my company at work, I'd be fired immediately.
It's wild that you say that, though, but then tell me that Takaichi has 80% approval with young people and is popular with old people, and she's LDP, and she's...
And her cabinet has people who are in both scandals.
So how did that happen? How does this political miracle happen? I'm trying to...
I think the political apathy of voters has meant that they just think having an outsider like Takaichi, who's not really an outsider. I mean, she is an outsider in that she's not from a political family, and she's not from a super rich family that, she had to work her way through college and all this stuff. She's a woman in a male-dominated party.
She's all about work, right? That's her whole thing.
Yeah. She. I think she said the other day she sleeps 2 hours a night. Do you want somebody to be running a country if they sleep 2 hours a night? I hope she was lying.
I'm gonna fall asleep on the nuke button or something.
But the previous prime minister was infamously always exhausted because he had only 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night as prime minister. But she's basically saying like, I can do 2. I'm like, look at that weakling. I'm so strong. And people are like, wow, she's so hardworking, and she's smiling all the time. The Japanese politicians don't smile. The guys don't smile that much.
I see.
And maybe she feels pressure as a woman to smile, or else people will think she's angry, right? There's also that kind of gender bias there. But when she's with Trump, smiling so much, a lot of young people are like saying, wow, she seems so much friendlier than the previous prime ministers, and she seems to be pulling off diplomacy so much better. She's hugging people. She's like, holding hands with people and stuff. And like the previous prime minister seems like the kid in high school who sits in the corner who doesn't talk to anybody. And they have all these memes of him just like at conferences, like looking at his phone, like while other leaders are talking to each other. And
so funny. That's so funny because we would, like on the American side, you would never hear that about Ishiba. I mean, if you heard about him at all, you would never know that he was a shot. It's just a funny thing that what goes viral in each country.
Yeah, I mean, he will be forgotten in like 2 years, basically, in the whole world, sadly. I don't think there was anything wrong with him. I think he was actually a very good human being. And maybe if he had been given a chance to reform the party, he could have, but he didn't. He wasn't a boss of a faction. He didn't have the institutional support to actually reform the LDP. So he ended up basically giving the scandal politicians a slap on the wrist. Like what he should have done was kick them out of the party and then run alternative LDP candidates with the backing of the local LDP parties. But instead he said, you have to run as an independent in the next election, but we're not even going to run anybody against you. And the local LDP volunteers will help you anyway. And so like that didn't look good to voters, especially when the Communist Party's newspaper reported that party funds were actually being sent to those local party offices to help with
so just in
activities.
Name only they were independent.
Yeah. So and some of them won, and then they got invited back into the party immediately. They said, oh, the voters decided that they're okay and we don't need to pursue this scandal anymore. And most voters were not okay with that. And right now, Takaichi is having several of the most dirty of these people in important posts in the government. And I don't think voters have caught on yet, or maybe they just don't care anymore. They're just caught up in the good vibes in the media, and like they talk in the media, like they're like, "Wow, did you see? She had this pen, this pink pen. This is the pen that Takaichi was using on her first day in office. It's a Jetstream, and it was pink." And on TV news, they're like, this pen is now going viral. Like people are buying it, and like look at the handbag she had. Like and like she was asked about her clothing, and she said she doesn't buy new clothing. This is a jacket from 15 years ago, and people are like, wow, she's so thrifty, and she has this cool pen, and like and like that's like the level of news reporting that's been going on for.
Her
a
vibes
long,
are great.
Yeah,
She's winning me over.
yeah.
It's all vibes at the end of the
It's
day.
all vibes.
That's what's so strange to me is that it's vibes, and that you're saying not much is fundamentally changing underneath it, you know, and again, you compare that to what's going on in American politics, where a whole lot has changed, you know, this year. It's really been, you know, different from previous administrations, from previous years, and it's so interesting to hear like how much the population seems to respond to just vibes being different. Same people underneath, same policies, but it's fascinating.
Yeah, and another thing though is that the internet right wing is a big thing in Japan. The Twitter is a space that for years, even before Elon, was dominated by like viral right wing accounts that share sometimes interesting stuff, sometimes racist stuff, sometimes super right wing stuff. And so these accounts have millions of followers and they go viral all the time. And they love Takaichi. And so you see positive posts about Takaichi going viral all the time now on Twitter. So if you're not even a political person, these are going to show up on your timeline. And for example, the other day, one of her ministers was being questioned by the opposition, and he started basically stammering. He couldn't name exactly what their policy was. So Takaichi was like, sit down, I'll explain it. And she went up and explained it. And they shared this, like, look at how awesome she is. But I mean, she's the one who appointed this dude to be in charge of that policy. But they spun it into like, whoa, the girl boss takes over from this like idiot. Like, she is the greatest prime minister ever.
But okay, so I want to ask, is part of this, in your estimation, a honeymoon period? She's new, right? Most politicians like this get 100 days, 200 days of grace, where it's like the vibes are more important. And then if prices keep going, you know, what if the things that cause her to ride this wave are still there, do you expect?
As well, just curious what you think will actually happen once we're through the first month.
It's hard to predict, but in the past, there always was a sort of honeymoon period that Japanese prime ministers would get, that they would start off with like over 50% approval rating, or when in the 2000s the LDP lost and the Democratic Party of Japan took over, they had basically Takaichi level support in their first few months, and then they just dropped the ball and everything, and they fell into the 20s and got wrecked by Abe in an election a couple years later. But the thing is, she doesn't have the key to solve this problem, right? The prices are not going to go down. There's no magic wand to wave here. Like, it's a very complicated problem. And she is going to pay more for defense, and you can't just print money if you want the end. Yeah. I mean, she is.
If there's this one thing I know this country loves doing.
Yeah. I mean, they can print money. Yes, they can. But then the yen will become even weaker and the prices will go up for everything also. So, I mean, Japan imports its energy. It imports most of its food. The rice is more expensive now, too. So the rice grown in Japan is double the price it used to be, and there are a lot of people who would eat rice every day. So
can I ask about that?
Well, hold that thought. I heard that's because of the foreigners too.
Yeah, what I wanted to ask is like, so I heard the rice thing was a big issue in this last election. Everyone was talking about the rice, and I heard there was this viral thing or some politician said that the reason it's so expensive is the foreigners are coming here and eating all the rice. And I've seen Doug pound a lot of rice.
Doing a lot of rice. No, there was truth. I was reading that article in this onigiri shop as I was like
bags and bags.
like an anime.
I literally, embarrassingly, there's been multiple stores I've been to where I order and then they come back and they say, like, this set already has these items, and I'll be like, oh, chotto ogui, which is like I'm a glutton basically.
And they write it in the newspaper, dude.
Right? Yeah. I mean, but then I follow up, and I was like, of all the food I've eaten in Japan, this is my favorite in Japan. And then they're very happy. Hopefully, maybe they're actually go to the kitchen. They're like, these foreigners.
Right. I mean, you're giving business to restaurants. I mean, yes, tourists are eating rice. Yeah, they're eating rice. People are eating rice. But I think that the core problem of the rice price increase was not tourists eating rice, but I think year or two ago, the government made this big announcement that, but by the way, there's like a slightly increased chance that sometime this year there could be the big one, the big earthquake. As a precaution, these are the things you should have in your house to keep. And then like one of those was like a month's supply of rice. And so on that brief time at the beginning of summer, everybody went out and bought all the rice in the supermarkets, and then the market has never recovered since. Oh, wow. So they drove up the prices with this, and the rice farmers don't want to sell it for cheaper anymore because they like the prices the way they are now. But there's not a shortage of rice anymore, technically. But the thing is, the government for many decades has seen that the population is declining and has planned by letting farmers know, don't grow too much rice because you're going to grow so much it's going to be too cheap. So they have like a whole chart they have laid out. And then in that 1 year where it suddenly the demand spiked over what it was supposed to be, and they haven't recovered from that. And they're trying to make the rice farmers grow more, but it takes a full year to get your crops out. And people don't want to buy American rice because it sucks. And so, or at least they say it tastes worse, even if it is a Japanese
Everyone
variety.
says that. That's what I've heard. I don't know. I can't figure it out. But
it all tastes the same to me.
I don't want to taste
my
nasty.
dumb American mouth cannot taste the difference in the rice.
I've been here for 20 years, and I sadly cannot tell the difference between premium rice and the cheapo rice.
People would kill you for this.
It's not in my DNA. Okay. I know. Right. I don't have the Yamato blood.
Can I ask, you brought some props about some parts of Japan you wanted to tell us about. I would really love to hear about these.
Okay. So these are little mascot characters. You might wonder what they are mascot characters of. This is Erika-chan, and this is Ryo-kun, her boyfriend. And they are mascot characters of the Northern Territories. The Northern Territories, or the Southern Kuril Islands, are 4 islands that the Soviet Union occupied after World War II that were settled by Japanese people and Ainu people. And the Soviets, they deported all the Japanese and then had white Russian settlers come in and occupy the former houses of Japanese people. Wow. And getting back these 4 islands has been a big goal of all the Japanese governments ever since. At one point, there was almost a chance that they might get 2 of the 4 back, but it's become such an issue that there is like a cabinet post dedicated to territorial disputes where they are in charge of reminding the public about the Northern Territories. So they have these cute, I forget what breed of penguin-like thing they are, but they have mascot characters. They have a website with a quiz where you can take quizzes about like the kinds of seafood that are there. And they have an isekai anime that they made about the Northern Territories. It's on YouTube for free. It doesn't have subtitles, sadly, but it's about a girl who, I think she gets in an accident and then she wakes up and she's in like 1940s Japan on these islands. The Russians come in and they're like, her dog barks at them to save her from the Russians attacking her and maybe assaulting her or something like that. And the Russians loot their homes and take their valuables. And in the end, they get on their boats and they're going away. And they have to leave their dogs behind. And the dogs run to the shore and are swimming after their boats. Swimming after their boats. And off into the distance, they see their dogs just going away and maybe dying. So
it's just, you want to be like furious. Like the point of the anime is to make you furious.
Does the isekai, like at any point in the isekai, do they like go to the you said the 1940s, right? Does it go to like any other parts of Asia during that time?
No. We don't. We never ask what's happening in other parts of Asia.
It's really just about those islands.
Actually, it may not be an isekai because when she wakes up, it turns out that she was inside of her grandmother's body temporarily, and her grandmother was she had a thing, and they immediately knew, that was me in you back then, living for that period. Isekai technically means another world, so it's actually the same world.
I see.
It's like a body swap kind of historical body swap drama.
It's a new genre.
Anime.
What do you think the odds are that Russia at some point says they will defend the islands and Takaichi threatens to behead them?
Well, I mean,
chain going.
Right. I mean, it does sound somewhat similar of, islands that were part of the nation at one point and now they're both claiming ownership. And
well, with territorial disputes, what really matters is who controls the islands, right? So Russia always talks about how they will defend the islands to the death. And,
so
this
it's the
is
same
sacred
dynamic.
Russian territory. We will never give it up to the evil Japanese and so on. They never technically signed the treaty ending World War II. The Russians walked out of the San Francisco Treaty.
Oh, wow.
The islands are kind of part of the reason why they have never resolved fully, like a full treaty. Although they have resumed diplomatic relations and so on, they didn't have a war-ending treaty in the way that the other allies did with Japan.
So if I go there right now, I'm going to hang out with a bunch of like Russian guys.
Well, if you get on a boat and you head that way, you're going to get shot.
Okay. Okay.
The Russians shoot at boats that enter the
Oh,
water.
What is the name of that? Can we pull it up? What are the name of the islands again?
Can I see what they look like?
Maybe on Google Maps or
Japan
something.
Northern Territories will give you a website.
There's a great Russian cartoon about this where they raise some dogs that they found.
Oh, that's
It's
on
beautiful.
the map. It's showing like they have a museum, but the Northern Territories website will have.
Wait, and I'm sorry, because there's two mascots. Does Japan only want 2 of the islands back, or they want all of them?
They have 4 technically. They have one bird for each island, and I don't have the full set, unfortunately. I only think they made these 2 because these are the main ones. But they have bird buddies that represent the smaller islands. But they're named Edi because I think it's Edi Futo is one of the islands. They want all 4 back. The islands are because they were not really developed in the other way Japan is. They have some of the most pristine nature compared to other parts of Japan, and they do have a limited number of Russian settlers. But it's just an issue that the Japanese politicians talk about, but they're never going to resolve it. Because Putin will never give up the territory. But Takaichi will never say she'll cut off Putin's head either because...
Never say never. We're in a strange time.
He's been he's been known to hold his ground, I suppose.
Is Takaichi, are these islands like in more of the discussion right now in the same way that immigration is, even though probably nothing will change?
No, the islands are rarely in the discussion, but there is a day in February every year where they have a national Remembrance Day where the government might buy TV commercials to remind people or hold a speech contest for junior high school students to give speeches about like how we should get back the islands. And recently they've been adding in, it's just like Ukraine, like Russia stole Ukraine's land. And that makes it more sympathetic. I think there's a lot more anti-Russian feeling in Japan now because of Ukraine. In my own anecdotal experience in classes, students seem much more interested in histories of war and stuff like that because of the ongoing war in Ukraine. Because war would seem so distant to them, and it is distant. But Russia is also Japan's neighbor too. So, the Russia scary bad, China scary bad, North Korea scary bad. These are all like big issues for Japan. Like North Korea is shooting missiles into the ocean near Japan like once a week. I think they did it last week. But luckily, we have a defense minister who can protect Japan, and that is Koizumi Shinjiro, who. Is the son of a former prime minister. Until he became defense minister, he was widely considered just a handsome guy who's the son of...
He is handsome.
He's
married to a TV personality, and they were like a celebrity couple. But on the Japanese internet, he's basically considered a huge idiot because he says things that are just redundant. Like he's in the past, he has this like very serious, like handsome face, and then he just says something that just sounds like he's repeating the same thing twice. And so he had this huge reputation of just being like an airheaded like son of a respected prime minister who only got his elected because he.
I thought you were gonna say airheaded son of a bitch.
No.
You really don't like him.
I was like, God damn.
I must have missed this. He's the son of a former prime minister?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in the recent leadership election, basically, like almost every candidate running against Takaichi was the son of a politician or the son of a government bureaucrat. in Japan.
Oh, so that's why she looks like not the Nepo baby of all
yeah,
the...
she's a rare non-Nepo baby politician to become a leader of Japan. And not only that, she's a woman, and that's an enormous achievement. But, the Nepo baby here, he has fans, and he has this signature jacket. It's a jacket from his hometown of Yokosuka. There's a photo of him and Pete Hegseth wearing matching jackets. He gave one to the American War Secretary when he visited Japan. There's the photo. It looks pretty cool. Hegseth even shared it on his Twitter, so he clearly liked it. And Koizumi, despite a reputation for being an airhead, he went to Columbia University for graduate school, probably from his connections, but he can speak fluent English. He worked at CSIS, so he's got the connections with, the defense people in Washington, because CSIS is where all the, big defense people go. So he, in reality, he actually is maybe a good choice to be defense minister. And
I was going to say, this feels like the perfect fit for the current American administration.
Yeah.
Good looking, you talk a lot on TV, you present a cool jacket.
The jacket's huge.
Seems like Trump loves Takaichi. Like, for better or for worse, it certainly seems like they know how to make the American government happy.
They've had a game plan since Prime Minister Abe was in office and handled Trump, and that is, never publicly disagree with Trump. When you meet him, bring lots of good news to tell him about Japan investing in America. They'll tell him all these numbers. The Japanese prime minister doesn't decide when car companies build factories in America, but they will announce it to Trump like, we're helping you in America. We're investing in your country. Like, we created thousands of jobs here, here, and here. And Trump will be like, awesome, cool. And it's all on one page with little pictures and stuff. So, and then
gifts, because he's a big gifts guy.
No, you got Shinzo Abe's golf club. Was a big
gold
thing.
golf ball too.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, so the Shinzo Abe golf thing was another part of this diplomacy. Like, be super nice to Trump, constantly flatter him, say how awesome he is.
I hate how other countries talk about our country right now, because it's usually so true, but it makes me so sad. Like, it's like I'm listening to you explain the Japanese government treating our president like a child. Like, here's the coloring book he has to fill out. Here's the pictures we show him. Here's the investment. Here's the numbers we make up that we can't actually commit to.
Number of gold golf clubs received. Trump 1, Biden 0.
Yeah, that shows Biden wasn't respected around the world.
I met my friend's 4-year-old daughter, and he was like, just see, no pressure, but if you bring a gift, like, she opens up a lot easier. You go to a friend's house, you're like, hey, here's this treat my cat loves. Give her this churro tube, and then she's gonna really open up. It sounds like a cat.
Right. Yeah, I have a story related to this. One time, a very, very famous professor at a major Western university, one of the most renowned experts on Japan-U.S. relations, I met him because he liked my Twitter posts and he wanted to meet me when he came to Tokyo. And he's like, Jeff, have you watched South Park? And I'm like, what? It's a pretty good show sometimes. And he's like, well, that Pokemon episode? I don't know if you guys have seen it.
20 years ago.
Yeah, right? It's long time ago, old school South Park. And he said, Abe is just like the Japanese guy to Randy Marsh. Oh, you have such a huge
it's like,
penis.
How big is
You're so big, your American penis. And I'm shocked hearing this from like a guy who's like 30 years older than me and like one of the most famous professors. And I'm like, whoa, like, so that's what they're thinking about Abe in like other like academic institutions when they see him, talking to Trump. There's also a famous viral moment where they were playing golf and Abe fell backwards into a sand trap, and Trump just kept on walking and didn't even notice. And Abe scrambles out of the sand to like get back. Sir. Oh, yes, your golfing is so great, But in Japan, though, there's this perception that Abe was like a diplomatic genius and he saved Japan from the wrath of Trump. And so they want to repeat Abe's playbook.
That's her whole thing, right? Not just with Trump, with everything. She's like an Abe.
Yeah,
we're gonna run that back.
And they want to see Abe as a great prime minister who never did anything wrong.
But I don't understand. Abe wasn't well liked right? In the wake of his of that scandal, in the wake of his lack of success or the economic position of the country now, people don't like Abe, but she's trying to replicate it. Maybe this is just asking the same question from earlier, but I really don't understand why that's such an attractive model to chase.
I think younger.
Did you see her pen? Did you see her pen or
Yeah,
not?
I feel like
hold on. I did forget about the pen.
Yeah.
I did forget about the pen.
This is a pen. That's the first sentence in every English textbook in Japan. The thing about Abe is, you're right, he wasn't loved. He had under 50% approval rating, for sometimes over 50% approval rating. But there were people who absolutely loved him. And then there were people on the left who thought he was like Hitler 2.0, and trying to turn Japan to fascism, like just exaggerating every bad thing he did. And he did some bad things. There were scandals and stuff, but he was a competent prime minister, and he didn't do anything terrible. And he shared the historical views of Japan's right-wing people who think that the war wasn't so bad. But he didn't officially reverse the apologies. And same with Takaichi. She hasn't reversed the apologies, but they still are like, yeah, but she knows the truth just like us. She just has to say it first.
Can I get a bit of the right-wing logic behind that? Like, they want to revoke the apologies for World War II, for actions taken during World War II?
They think that the apologies were overblown. Like, Japan fought that war in self-defense. Even the invasion of China was
classic self-defense move.
Classic self-defense.
Well, there's a guy, the former chief of staff of Japan's Air Force. He wrote an essay arguing that secret Chinese communist spies orchestrated the incident that caused Japanese and Chinese to exchange fire and result in the whole full-scale invasion of China. And he won a prize from the owner of, somebody who's in the family that owns the Appa Hotels chain. Appa Hotels is a chain that many of your viewers will stay at. If you stay there, it's a very affordable, small hotel room, and you get free right-wing literature in English that will tell you why Japan was not bad in World War II and why it was actually...
Like Ludwig's house when you stay there.
It is like Ludwig's house.
He has a Mein Kampf and stuff.
If you go, there's a little brochure in the guest room at Ludwig's house, and it's a crazy read.
Yeah, I mean, they think a lot of the atrocities are just fabrications, Chinese people lying. They think that... the Americans forced Japan into Pearl Harbor by cutting off Japan's oil and arming China. So they think the war crimes trials after the war were just unfair victors' justice. So that shrine, the Yasukuni Shrine in Tokyo, that is like a place where the spirits of all the war dead, including the 14 war leaders who were executed in the war crimes trials, is like a political flashpoint for diplomatic things. So if Takaichi... she's visited it all the time in the past when she wasn't prime minister, but right now she's kind of holding her cards, and it's not clear if she'll visit or not. But if she doesn't, her supporters will still be like, yeah, but she visited all those times in the past, and she still believes these things. So she still respects these. But the emperor and the emperor's family has never gone to that shrine ever since they enshrined the war criminals in the 1970s. They just stopped going completely. And so the position of a more moderate conservative in Japan is that I will visit Yasukuni when it is made to be like a shrine that the emperor can visit. And that sounds cooler than I think the wartime leaders are the worst bad guys ever, and that's why I'm not visiting. And there's a lot of problems with those war crimes trials if you read about them. I mean, they were very problematic. I'm not saying that they were not guilty, but it was very arbitrary about who got blamed for what.
Right.
And
Look, we dropped 2 atomic bombs. It's not like there's not like a clean bill of health on one side.
Right. I'm reminded, and every time Japan is playing in an international sports game against America, I'm reminded on Twitter of those bombs by people leaving responses. But
people do whip that one out.
People do drop
a little too liberally, I would say. A little too.
Yeah. I think one of the big shocks to Japanese students when I teach them about the politics of war memory is that in America, there are a lot of people who are like, hell yeah, the bombs were good, and we should have dropped them, and like, why would America ever apologize for that? And Japanese actually, they didn't. A lot of them don't know that there's Americans who have this like gung ho view. Yeah. I show them videos about it, and they're like, wow, I can't believe. Like, there's a video of an A-bomb scientist who meets a Japanese TV channel, takes him to meet elderly bomb survivors who ask him for an apology. And he's like, why don't you apologize for Pearl Harbor? And they start crying. Like, these like 80-year-olds start crying. And he's just like, remember Pearl Harbor. I had a friend who died at Pearl Harbor. Like, those bombs like are the best thing. Like, and they asked him, like, there's an eternal flame in Hiroshima, like, that will go, that, like, they say they'll turn it off when A-bombs are removed, like nuclear weapons are gone from this world. And they ask him, like, do you think this will ever be turned off? And he's like, I think the world will run out of gas first. Like, so,
oh my God. You guys are a real big nuke fan.
Well, he was a nuclear scientist, so it was his job.
Sense,
But
I didn't know we'd go in this direction, but now I'm curious because I have to ask. So obviously the bombs is a very contentious topic, and the argument for it, beyond just some guy going gung ho Pearl Harbor, I think the let's say more sophisticated argument would be Japan was not willing to surrender in this war. They were basically saying we would have to do a land invasion. This would have taken, tens of millions of lives on both sides, and the bomb was the way to escalate it to the point that Japan was forced to give up, and that was the better of two horrific outcomes. That is the argument on the American side. Is that taught to Japanese people? Is that considered? Like, how is?
I don't think that it's taught in that level of detail to Japanese. I mean, in America, we learn it in that way, and that's the way they teach it when you take a tour of the Smithsonian, the one in Virginia that has the atomic bomb airplane at it. They'll tell you, this saved millions of lives by dropping these bombs.
Right.
But there is a whole. I mean, what ifs in history are impossible. You can't prove a counterfactual.
Yeah.
But there are all kinds of arguments to be made that Japan was at the point of giving up, or they were willing to accept the Potsdam Declaration, which is the unconditional surrender terms that we gave them, on the condition that the emperor be not abolished, that the monarchy would still exist. And there were back channel communications that eventually led the Japanese to believe that the emperor would be kept, and that really contributed to their decision to surrender. And the Soviet invasion of Manchuria was also as big, maybe even bigger than the atomic bombs to the Japanese side. From their perspective, their whole game plan was Russia is still neutral. They have a treaty that promises not to attack us that we signed with them in, I think, 1940. So this non-aggression pact allows us to use Russia, who are friends with those other countries, to negotiate an end to the war. But then Russia broke this treaty. The treacherous Russians broke the treaty, and that's another part of like the anti-Russian
So they got
thing.
the islands, right?
Yeah, so like they had a treaty. They promised not to, like, for at least 1 or 2 more years, there was a non-aggression pact, and the Japanese respected that pact when Hitler invaded Russia. They ultimately had a debate about whether they were going to attack Russia, and they said, no, we have this treaty, and also the southward advance is more important. I'm getting off topic, but anyway.
Sure.
Yeah, but the A-bombs, there's all kinds of arguments to be made, and I think a lot of Japanese believe that maybe the war could have ended without the bombs, and they certainly think that the bombs are something that you shouldn't celebrate. You should think about the suffering. One of the biggest groups of people who died were junior high school students because they were working in factories in the middle of the city, and so it's like a very tragic thing. Every Japanese school child tends to either watch movies that are graphic about Hiroshima and Nagasaki, or visit the places as a school trip and see just the horror of it. And so they can't imagine the idea of like people joking about the atomic bombs, or like wearing atomic bomb T-shirts and stuff like that. Like, that really offends them like greatly. Or like if somebody says like on the internet, as they often do, like 2 weren't enough or something like that, like that makes them very angry. And I remember I was interviewed by the media back when there was the Barbenheimer thing going on in America.
Yeah, I was going to ask about Barbenheimer.
And then like Japanese people, some of them got offended by Barbenheimer because the official Warner Brothers Japan account liked or retweeted some comment about it. And then they're like, what the hell? Like, we're going to boycott the Barbie movie now because you're saying that like the A-bomb thing is funny. Because it was like a meme with like Barbie and an A-bomb or something like that. And so that Warner Brothers Japan had to apologize. Actually, I think it was the U.S. account, Warner Brothers U.S. account liked something. So Warner Brothers Japan had to say, sorry, that wasn't us. Like, we are respectful of the bombs and like it's a tragedy and stuff. And so like it's not a thing you joke about here.
Is that
got to be incredibly weird to have America combining Barbie and one of the greatest tragedies into this fun meme marketing, and you're sitting here in this other side of the world.
Japan had like a 9/11 movie mixed with an anime that were there.
It'd be incredibly strange.
It'd be an insane, strange thing.
I cannot even imagine.
That would unfortunately be really funny.
Although
I mean, it does say that the box office of Oppenheimer in Japan was pretty big. Like
there was this thing on the internet, people claiming that it's never going to be released in Japan. But there are cinema fans here, okay? Lots of people who like films by famous directors, and they're not going to miss out on. I think it's Nolan directed it, right?
Yeah.
So like they are going to want to see the next Christopher Nolan movie, and they don't care if it's about the atomic bomb or not. And I was interviewed by some Japanese media at the time. I had luckily seen the film in America while visiting my parents, so I actually knew that the film is not at all celebrating the bombs in the slightest. Like he's torn morally over having created this thing. And so there is one scene where he's sort of going crazy while people around him are cheering after the bomb went off. But like, I think some Japanese person who saw the movie abroad misread that and said like, there's a scene of people cheering. And then like people on the internet were like, what? Cheering the atomic bomb? That's gross. But when it came out, it did fine. It did fine. People went to see it. They saw, even some atomic bomb survivors went to see it, and they said, you know, this is a pretty good anti-nuclear movie, I think. But maybe they should have shown a little bit of Japan, you know?
Right.
Is there, because in the last, let's say 10 to 20 years in America, right? I think you grow up in the US, using the example of the atomic bombs, with that narrative of justification, which, you can argue about the merits of. And I think we have a lot of things like that in American history where there are ways you're taught about how things unfolded in the past. And there has been a large, educational or social movement that pushes against that and has people question the way we were taught American history, America's place in the world. Is there any sort of movement like that within Japan, within academia in Japan? Because at the same time I'm hearing that, which I can fully understand people being upset at the idea of jokes about atomic bombs or justification for atomic bombs. Japan is in their own way a terrible perpetuator of war crimes within World War II, as an example, right? And the constant thing you hear as an American is Japan's denial of the gravity of those crimes or even the recognition of those crimes. So in the same way that the US is going through kind of a period of time where people are reconciling the things that our country has done in the past, is there anything like that here?
Yes, actually, basically the genesis for the Shinzo Abe, Takaichi kind of conservative nationalist movement took place in the 1990s as a backlash against the apologies that the Japanese government made at the time. And the Japanese government officially recognizes a whole list of these things happening. It's their official position, but there were politicians within the LDP who said, we shouldn't have made this apology. Like, the comfort women were not sex slaves. You know, the Nanking massacre is wildly exaggerated or didn't happen at all. And so these politicians, they looked at the education system, the post-war education system in Japan. It teaches that the war was a war of aggression and it was bad and it caused suffering, and some of the textbooks mention atrocities, but it's a history textbook for entrance exams, so it's very boring. It's like memorize dates and names so you can fill out on multiple choice, and so they don't really go into that much detail. But the right wing in Japan was like, why are they teaching woke history like in our school? They didn't call it woke; they call it masochistic history. So like masochistic, inflicting
yourself,
pain on yourself so that you won't love your country. So I mean, if now they've started using the word woke in katakana woke.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
No way, dude.
That's beast.
I think somebody called me that on social media once, but
You're woku?
yeah. But it's the American woke history thing started in Japan in the 1990s, and it created a whole conservative movement to try to change history to be more patriotic, which means mention the good stuff, don't mention the bad stuff, or downplay the bad stuff, or even justify the bad stuff as understandable based on what was happening at the time, and say that, China and Korea are lying about history and so on. And China and Korea, to be fair, are lying about history. A lot.
Everyone is, right?
But they do exaggerate things. But many of these atrocities are very, very real, and they happened. It's just that, on the Korean side and the Chinese side, sometimes they give very high estimates that are higher than what most historians internationally would say is the actual number of certain things. And so this is what Japanese right-wing people lock onto and say, we have to correct the wrong history that's overseas. And just mentioning comfort women as sex slaves is already like something that would get them to like go after a publishing company or any kind of they went after, I think, a major American textbook company for doing this. They had the embassy complain to them because they used the word sex slave for comfort women. This was under Abe as prime minister, and I think Takaichi wants to continue this. They want countries to take down statues that are commemorating the comfort women and say that they were sex slaves on it, because the Japanese side is that the military wasn't directly involved; it was private brokers. There are a variety of circumstances. Slavery, not technically slavery, but I mean they
You never want to be doing air quotes for slavery.
yeah,
This is
it's
a bad. You're in a bad.
like slave labor during the war. It's not slave labor. It's conscription. It's conscription. Okay, they were conscripted. Not slavery. Like that's their view on people who had to, Koreans and Chinese who had to work in coal mines and stuff like that. They do not like the word slave for that. They want to use conscription. Conscripted laborers, which, I mean, what is conscription?
It's like the sex slaves were bad, and then Japan being like, they were slaves.
Yeah.
Oh, and they also point to there's receipts that show that some of them did get paid a lot of money. And I guess that there were some who were not slaves technically, and some of them maybe did volunteer. But I mean, a lot of them were tricked into it, or they were, circumstances of poverty caused
I can't imagine it was all above board.
Sell them. Yeah. I mean, Japan had a legalized system of prostitution back then where parents could basically loan their children to brothels, their daughters to brothels, if they were of a certain age. And then they would work to pay off a debt that their family had. So if their family goes into debt, okay, we got to sell our daughter. And the system was policed in a way that the licensing system, they would make sure that it was mostly just poor people who were kind of forced into it by economic means, rather than women from good families volunteering to become prostitutes. So there's a lot of literature written about this. It's like a complicated system, but Japanese people who argue against the comfort women narrative is that it was within this legal system, and it was above board according to them. So it's a whole can of worms, though.
Can I bring it back to modern day a bit? Because there's a question I wanted to ask. I think something that's always shocked me historically on a grand scale is how quickly we went from America drops 2 bombs on Japan to, if you flash forward 50, 60 years, in the 90s, America and Japan are probably the 2 of the closest allies in the world. They're 2 deeply intertwined cultural and government data. It's like a crazy thing that this could have changed that way so quickly. A generation is apart. And I wanted to hear about, because you mentioned this recent thing with Takaichi and Trump getting closer, and there's a good sentiment there. But what was the stance in Japan around, especially during the Ishiba times, the surprise Trump tariffs? There's a sense on the American side that we are alienating some allies, that we are pushing people away. What was that like on the Japan side?
Well, I mean,
I'm sure it's different opinions all about it.
On the Japan side, it's always, Trump is sort of like a national emergency, and we need to respond by trying to get him to like us as much as possible. So the tariffs, obviously nobody likes the tariffs, but they need to get a deal that is good enough that Japan is getting the lowest tariffs of anybody. But like Trump is just seen as like basically like a natural disaster that needs to be addressed. And if the prime minister screws up on their first meeting with Trump, then that is like seen as like, oh,
it's like their fault more than his, though. It's
playing Sim City, and then it's like an earthquake is entering your city. It's like a Trump has entered again.
The drop down menu, you pick like volcano or Trump.
Right.
Yeah, like when right before Ishiba was when he became prime minister, the last guy, he hadn't met Trump yet for a few months. And everybody's like, why hasn't he met Trump? Is it because Trump doesn't like him? Does Trump know that like Ishiba and Abe were like rivals who didn't like each other? I bet that's why. I bet that he's gonna, when he sees Trump, he's gonna choke. He's gonna choke. Like, and then Ishiba meets Trump, and his like game plan, he has the same interpreter that Abe used, the same guy that Trump knows. He calls him, I think, the little prime minister or something like that. The same Japanese interpreter, and he just glazes Trump. He just like, oh, you're great, you're amazing. Like, yeah, I see you're making America great again, and I want to help you by like having jobs. And like, I am from a rural area that is struggling, just like Vice President Vance. And like, they're on like, it's like they just don't want a repeat of the Zelensky sofa incident, right? So, because that terrified, I think, Japanese diplomats. Like, oh man, like what if we have a situation where Trump just goes off the rails and just is like, why aren't you saying thank you to us? Like, yeah, you're not dressed well enough. And like, oh, of course the Japanese wear neckties, but I mean, still.
That's crazy, though.
Like the Zelensky thing, I think, was a big sign that Trump 2.0 is not the same as Trump 1.0. So you really have to praise him even more and present him with gifts. And
I guess I want to understand why someone like Takaichi or this general attitude of like, let's not get on America's bad side, doesn't apply to an equally or near equally big economic giant like China, where she seems more willing to be able to kind of piss off China with this Taiwan comment. And then yet, like, what is because I assume the trade between U.S. and Japan and China and Japan are similar. I can't.
Yes, it's a major trading partner for Japan. Japan gets stuff like rare earth metals from China, and it needs the Chinese market. It needs Chinese tourists. But nationalistic Japanese, I was just like looking at some Twitter posts on the way over here. People are like, next step, we should just break off all diplomatic relations with China. Hell yeah. Like China, we hate China. Like China's bad. Like they're the evil empire. And like, so, 70-80% of Japanese have a negative view of China because China is, an aggressive, undemocratic country that is doing bad things and is saying bad things about Japan, while also telling Japan to apologize again for things Japan did 80 plus years ago, and telling young people in Japan who have nothing to do with what happened 80 years ago to feel responsibility for that. And I think anybody in any country, no matter what their age, should know their country's history and know that their country has done bad things and good things in the past. But I just think that them seeing it coming from China, it feels like why is this authoritarian state telling us that we're the bad ones for something that happened way before my grandparents were born for a lot of these students. So
I'm curious, like, it sounds that the average Japanese person has a much more positive view of America and the current global climate than China. And that's surprising given that, again, we've talked about this natural disaster of a leader that we have. And I've often wondered at how crappy it must feel in another part of the world to have America just swing wildly every 4 years with total unpredictability. And this is happening again. And so is there more going on there besides that sort of history? Do you feel like that might change anytime soon? I guess I'm confused at how even with Trump's attitude towards the rest of the world, that still we're seen that much more positively.
Well, I think if you polled Japanese people about Trump himself, they would probably have a negative view. I think 70% wanted Harris to win the election. But but Japan needs America. It needs it more than anything, really. If you are to continue the foreign policy track, which is not being absorbed as a satellite of China or becoming a pro-China country, if it wants to be a part of the liberal democratic West and resist the rise of China, it can't do it without America's help. It cannot defeat China militarily. It needs the Americans. It needs their bases. And so it is a huge crisis to have a president who talks about, they're not spending enough. I don't think we should protect them, or abandoning Ukraine and stuff like that. That's like Japanese wonder, well, what if America has a president who just thinks like, who cares if some small islands in Japan get invaded by China? Like, I'm not going to send our army and start World War III over that shit. I mean, so like Japanese have this anxiety about requiring American protection from China. But they still like America as a country. It's just the anxiety from a president who might not protect Japan is very real.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, they love LA, they love Otani.
I know they love LA.
We know they love Otani. Otani mural's like 10 feet from my building.
You go to Dodgers, I swear, if you go to a Dodgers game right now, like 1 in 4 people there is Japanese. It's crazy.
I went to a game in Baltimore a couple months ago to watch Otani, and like, I mean, there was so many Japanese people there in Baltimore. They must have flown in because there are not that many Japanese people in Maryland. They were all sitting around my wife and all. I can hear lots of people speaking Japanese, and so like, I mean, a couple of years ago I saw Otani in Philadelphia, and tons of Japanese people came to that game. They're traveling across the country to see their national hero. I mean, everybody loves Otani. I was walking here, and there was a stationery store that had a sign up that said, "Special sale that because Otani won the MVP award."
That's awesome.
The NL MVP sale.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I was wondering, with what we're talking about right now, what beyond little things like people, there seems to be some anti-immigrant or like racism within Japan in regards to Chinese tourists or Chinese people that have moved here. But what is the dislike of China like grounded in? Like, I know that a lot of countries around China, for instance, have territorial disputes, like a lot of Southeast Asian countries having difficulties in the South China Sea. So what is Japan's kind of geopolitical issue or fear with China? Is it that you're literally going to be attacked one day? Is it a security concern? Is it the actions that they've taken against the country? Like,
yes, I mean, they are afraid they will be attacked one day. There is a set of islands or rocks, basically the Senkaku Islands, that are controlled by Japan. They're uninhabited, and they're right near sort of close to some outer lying islands of Japan that are populated, and also some.
Oh, they're tiny.
Yeah, they're tiny little things. They're kind of close to Taiwan, Okinawa, and mainland China. And so Japan has controlled these since the 1890s, I believe. China has been aggressively sending patrol boats to patrol its own territory. And the Japanese send their patrol boats to respond to the Chinese boats, and they just kind of go around each other saying, like, this is our territory, get out of here now. This is our territory, get out.
Just with bullhorns, right? Is it the ones where they like kind of nudge each other and have the water cannons, or is that?
Thank God, not yet.
Okay.
That's what happens. The
Philippines
has reached that level of escalation, and Japan is actually helping the Philippines. They're building boats for the Philippine Coast Guard to use. So it's called not ODA, but it's OSA, Official Security Assistance. So they're helping with those disputes as well. But these boats go back and forth, and this happens almost every day of the year.
That's wild.
Japanese fishing boats that go to that area will provoke even more Chinese boats to come out. And so the Japanese government tries to discourage fishermen from going there, even though it's Japanese territory. That also angers nationalists. Like, what the hell? Well, you can't even fish. I mean, there were these guys connected to the YouTubers I wrote about where they caught fish there. and then they made a point of serving it as sushi to various LDP lawmakers in the National Diet Building. And they also had a restaurant in Tokyo that collabed with them where you can go and have a special menu and have Senkaku Island sushi. I didn't go because I think it was the pandemic at the time, and I was in a different area of Tokyo, and it was pretty expensive, to be honest. But I would have wanted to, though. But yeah, I mean, like, so these islands are a potential flashpoint for World War III because if China does try to get them, America is treaty bound to defend Japanese territory or territory administered by Japan. The security treaty says that. And Japan will expect America to back it up there. And Trump, I think the Trump administration has confirmed that they will, but you never know. I mean, the Trump administration changes its mind quite often. And also Taiwan, the Taiwan issue, if Taiwan is invaded and America responds, where do you think those American troops are going to be coming from? They're coming from Okinawa. They're coming from, Yokosuka, and they're coming from like Atsugi and other bases in Japan. And so when the Chinese respond with missiles, they're going to be hitting Japan, hitting Okinawa to take out those Americans. Japanese people will die in such an exchange. It is very true that Japan would be probably dragged into a war over Taiwan if it happened. And this is the nightmare scenario that nobody wants, that Takaichi, brought up.
Said it aloud.
Yeah, said the quiet part out loud. Yeah. And I mean, she's not wrong for saying that. Everybody knew that's what's going to happen, but it creates this issue where China needs to save face by doing something in response.
I did want
that has to be incredibly anxiety inducing. I just really hadn't thought about this, Of course not. But man, if you're Japanese, like it really must feel like this is an existential worry and threat. Like, man.
Especially as China gets more and more powerful and goes around their weight more often.
And there's also the fear that China is rising, but it's also facing a demographic crisis of its own.
Yeah.
So it might feel like it needs to strike before it starts getting weaker. There are people who've written books and articles about this, that the growing China thing, it's going to peak. And when it sees that it's stopped peaking, they're going to want to, roll the dice on Taiwan, or they'll never have a chance ever again.
Sure.
And that's a scary possibility. Hopefully it'll never happen. If it does, then I'm pretty sure this studio and myself will be obliterated by nuclear weapons or something.
Okay.
You heard it on Limited Stand
So
first.
I wanted
we have a bit of a curse. We shouldn't talk about
These figures will be melted by the fire.
This is dark. I don't like this.
Rengoku was
I did want to come back to maybe potentially something fun to wind this episode down. Is that because you had brought up the topic of right-wing YouTubers and specifically conspiracy theories, because we had a lot of fun with our conspiracy theory episode where we walked through we walked through a lot of English speaking, like primarily American conspiracy theories, and I wanted to know if you could drop some Japanese internet crazy conspiracy theories. What goes around?
Sure. Well, with the right-wing Sansei To Party, one of their conspiracy theories is that you must eat organic rice, and it's because bread is a globalist scheme to cause cancer.
I've been saying this.
Ever since the American occupation, the Americans have been importing grain and trying to make Japanese people eat bread.
I didn't think you guys picked up on that.
I know. How'd they find out?
How did you guys find out about
We
that?
kept this shit so secret.
Did you know that there was no cancer in Japan until after World War II? Did you know this, guys? That's I
And they
saw
don't think
online.
it was the nuclear radiation, they think it was the bread.
It's so funny to be like fear-mongering right-wing guy, and it's surge in cancer, maybe. I don't know if that's actually real.
Yeah, it might be because people are living longer and the medical systems are now dealing with cancer more, or actually, no, it's the globalists.
It's the bread.
The globalist bread.
Globalist bread. They want us to eat this awful bread and food with additives in it, and you have to have an organic farm, buy our special rice that's been blessed by a Shinto priest. It's twice as expensive as the more expensive rice, but you're gonna
Who cares?
you can get it through us, and please buy our merch. And
To be clear, it's
I'm
not
just
a conspiracy.
imagining Japanese Alex Jones like selling special rice on his
there is
store.
one. There is
Like
one.
the athletic greens of rice he's pushing in his podcast. To be clear, it's not a conspiracy in that Americans do want everyone to eat more additives. That's
RFK is right. Tylenol is bad. No, but like it's like the bread thing is a thing, and also like it used to be like Japanese would claim that when they go to America they can't eat the food because the Japanese body can't digest meat the way Americans do. I don't think there's much proof of that. But there's also like kind of spiritual beliefs about the uniqueness of Japaneseness, like being closer to nature just because you're a Japanese person, or like there was a quack scientist guy who did experiments, and he figured out that Japanese can sense nature better than Westerners do, and they can appreciate the sound of flowing water and other stuff more. I'm
terrible at it,
and that's why Japanese language has so many onomatopoeias in it for like sounds and stuff. But let's see, other conspiracy theories are, I think we kind of mentioned the secret Korean thing a little bit, but they think that there are secret Koreans among us all over the place, because if they just dress the same and speak native Japanese, then we don't know if somebody has Korean blood, and maybe sometimes if you go far enough to the scale of crazy, they'll have like a list of prime ministers, and they'll be like, this one was Korean, this one's Korean, this one's Korean, this one's Korean. That one not Korean, this one Korean, this one Korean, this one Korean, and some of them even think Abe was Korean, which is pretty crazy.
Crazy to think that 14 of the last 15 Japanese prime ministers were just Korean.
That's why the government has been so bad in apologizing. It's because the Koreans are in control, and the reason why we have to pay our taxes is because the Ministry of Finance is controlled by secret Koreans who became Japanese citizens, and
Dude, it's almost kind of comforting to know that people are crazy everywhere.
It is. I've been feeling this lately. This is like, it's just all the same shit, but with different
little
packaging.
flavors, yeah.
It has different flavor to it, but it's the same shit, and it's in a way, it's kind of awesome. It's kind of awesome. It's kind of awesome.
I don't know about awesome.
No, because it's like proof that it's all dumb, for one. Like it's proof that we just make up dumb shit to divide each other all the time. And that's, in a weird way that's comforting. It's like confirmation that it's all made up.
Sure.
Because we don't, in the US, it's not secret Koreans, right? It's some other ethnic group. It's some other, type of people. And and it's just whoever you don't like everywhere becomes this thing, and it's proof that it doesn't have to be that way. That's the good thing I take away from it, is like how it's proof that it is so inherently ridiculous that we all make up shit in the same stupid way.
Yeah, like a few months back, I was invited to brief some chiefs of staff of U.S. Congress people who were visiting Japan. And somehow we got to the topic of the bread conspiracy theory. But I basically told them, think of every conspiracy theory in America about Jews and just replace it with Koreans, and you're almost like
almost the same. I think like it's the underlying, or not the underlying thing. The surface level issue is always bad. Like this is not something that is good that it proliferates. But I think it's just this idea that everybody has kind of the same problems everywhere, and we have to step up and figure them out together somehow, and escape all this, escape all the bullshit.
And I mean, while shows like this are good at talking about how these are bad things, the internet is really causing conspiracy theories to just blow up to a level they could never have done before. I mean, it used to be just like fringe magazines and occasional TV show. But now, like, we live in a world where we're going to have more family members every year who are believing in conspiracy theories. And people who are voting based on conspiracy theories and presidents who believe in conspiracy theoes.
Going back to Thanksgiving, and I'm talking to my like a Canadian American dad, and he's like, "It's actually the secret Koreans."
He's been on the LDP Facebook.
One more thing to kind of close this out is naturally when we look at other countries, we have this often these misunderstandings of like what's actually going on in these places. Is there one last like this is common misunderstanding that you hear from Westerners about Japan that you'd like to speak on or correct or is different from the way that Japanese people see it here?
Well, I think I would like to circle back to the idea of like Japan denying history and stuff like that, to say that in academia, in universities, in academic books, real history books, television documentaries, they show the real history, the ugly parts of history. They have documentaries, like NHK made a documentary about Unit 731, the biological weapons unit. Then, you know, there are lots of books in Japanese by historians that go into the details of this stuff. And so not every person in Japan is like a history denier. Lots of people think the war was terrible and that it should never have happened and there should never, ever again be another war like this. And that's the very mainstream view in Japan. And the denialist view, the one that, you know, of course, it's the thing I study, so I like to talk about it a lot. That is sort of a minority view in Japan. And not everybody is going to agree with what Takaichi says about the war. Although they might think that, you know, we've apologized as a country officially so many times, there's no need for more apologies. But that's different from saying, like, actually Japan was not the bad country in the war. And so I think that you have to understand there's a lot of people in Japan who do lots of hard work writing excellent books that don't get translated into English often, unfortunately, where they have so much more detail than our English books have about the bad things that Japan and its government did and the military did during World War II. And those people are most of academia in Japan. It's only like fringe people who are denialists.
Cool.
Jeffrey, this is absolutely
This is an incredible conversation.
This is exactly one of the types of conversations I was hoping we could have on this podcast. So it's getting to really hear about this very interesting perspective. So thank you very much.
I'm very happy to be on a format that doesn't shrink me into 4 minutes and force me to just say a soundbite. So.
No, that was a really cool conversation. I learned a lot.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Jeffrey.
Thanks.
Wait, anywhere people should follow you?
So on Twitter, at Mr. Jeff, and then the letter U, that's Mr. Jeffu, you could say. That's me on Twitter. On YouTube, I have a very small channel called Japan Matters that I haven't updated in like 6 months, but maybe I'll make a video about politics soon on it, but it's only got like 1,000 subs. But yo, like and subscribe, everybody.
Yeah, he's a YouTuber now.
Thank you. All right. See you guys later.
Thanks everybody.